Have you ever reached a point where failing stopped surprising you? Where another setback did not even hurt anymore because you were already expecting it? Maybe you tried something bold and it collapsed. Maybe you tried again and it ended the same way. And slowly, a quiet thought began to grow inside you. Maybe this just is not for me. That is where most people turn back, not because they lack ability, but because doubt feels heavier than effort. The truth is, failure does something strange to the mind. The first time it shocks you, the second time it embarrasses you. By the third or fourth time, it starts rewriting your identity. You no longer say I failed, you start saying I am a failure. And that shift is dangerous, because once you believe failure defines you, you stop experimenting, you stop risking, you stop trying. But what if repeated failure is not evidence that you are incapable? What if it is simply evidence that you are early? Every meaningful path has a stretch where results are invisible, where effort feels wasted, where progress cannot be measured. Most people interpret that silence as rejection. In reality, it is often preparation. Before any real breakthrough, there is a season of confusion, a season where nothing seems to reward you. The difference between those who eventually succeed and those who disappear is not talent. It is not luck. It is who decides to stay a little longer inside that uncomfortable season. And when you decide to stay, something else begins to surface. A pattern. Not in the market, not in the economy, but in you. Look closely at most repeated failures, and you will notice something uncomfortable. The details change, the outcome does not. Different projects, different industries, different partners. Yet somehow the ending feels familiar. It is rarely random. It is usually a blind spot. Many people move from idea to idea, chasing a fresh start. They believe the next attempt will magically remove the weaknesses of the last one. But habits travel with you. Impatience travels with you. Lack of preparation travels with you. Avoiding difficult research travels with you. And until those patterns are confronted, failure keeps repeating itself in new costumes. The painful truth is this: it is easier to launch something new than to examine what you did wrong. Starting again feels hopeful, reflection feels humbling. But growth begins the moment you stop blaming timing or circumstances and start asking harder questions. Did I truly understand the problem I was solving? Did I study the people I wanted to serve? Did I prepare for the long road? Or was I fueled mostly by excitement? Repeated failure is rarely proof that you should quit. More often, it is feedback that you have not changed your approach. The breakthrough does not come from trying harder. It comes from trying differently. There comes a moment when the weight of those patterns becomes impossible to ignore. Not just disappointment, but exhaustion. The kind that settles in your chest late at night, when the noise fades and you are alone with your thoughts. You begin replaying every attempt, every launch, every promise you made to yourself. And you start asking a quieter question. What if the problem is not the idea? What if it is me? That realization feels heavy because it removes the comfort of blaming circumstances. No more blaming the market. No more blaming bad timing. No more blaming other people. It forces you to look inward, and that is where real change begins. Hitting bottom is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the moment you admit that repeating the same strategy will not create a different outcome. It is the moment pride softens, the moment you become teachable. When you finally say, I do not know enough yet, I am not prepared enough yet, and instead of quitting, You decide to rebuild yourself first, before rebuilding another project. That shift from defending your ego to strengthening your foundation is the true turning point. Not success, not money, but humility. Because humility opens the door that stubbornness keeps closed. And once humility opens that door, something unexpected often appears: guidance. Not always in the form you imagined, not always a famous mentor or a dramatic rescue. Sometimes it is a conversation, a question, a single sentence that reframes everything. When you are finally ready to listen, because advice stops sounding like criticism, it starts sounding like direction. The right guidance does not flatter you. It challenges you. It asks uncomfortable questions. What did you assume instead of verify? Where did you rush instead of prepare? Why did you expect results before building proof? True mentorship is not about motivation. It is about clarity. It forces you to slow down, to study before acting, to understand the rules of the game before stepping onto the field. Many people search for shortcuts. They want capital connections, a lucky break. But the most valuable gift someone can give you is perspective. Because perspective corrects the errors you cannot see on your own. And when your thinking changes, your decisions change. When your decisions change, your results eventually follow. Guidance does not guarantee success, but it dramatically reduces avoidable mistakes. It turns blind ambition into disciplined execution. And that shift from emotional reaction to intentional strategy is where momentum quietly begins. Clarity alone is not enough. You can understand your mistakes, you can see your blind spots, you can even have a better strategy and still fail. Because insight without structure collapses under pressure. This is where commitment becomes real. Not emotional commitment. Not the kind you feel after watching an inspiring story, but calendar commitment, time commitment. A decision that you will give your next attempt a fixed runway, long enough for results to compound. Most people quit too early, not because their idea is wrong, but because their timeline is unrealistic. They expect traction in a few months, validation in a few weeks, profit before proof when progress does not arrive on schedule. They assume the path is broken. In reality, they simply underestimated the cost of momentum. Every meaningful build has a quiet phase, where effort is high and feedback is low, where you are working without applause, without visible growth. That phase tests patience more than skill. If you leave during that stretch, you never reach the part where small wins begin stacking. Structure protects you from your own impatience. It reminds you that consistency over time, not intensity for a short burst, is what turns preparation into progress. Time is the part most people misunderstand. They think effort alone creates results, but effort without duration rarely compounds. You can work intensely for a few weeks, even a few months, and still see almost nothing change. That does not mean you are failing. It may simply mean you are still early. Real progress has phases. At first, you are learning, making mistakes, adjusting quietly behind the scenes. It feels slow, almost invisible. Then small improvements begin to appear, a better response, a slightly stronger outcome, a hint that something is starting to connect. If you stop during the early phase, you never reach the moment when patterns begin to reward you. Growth is rarely explosive at the beginning. It is gradual, layered, built through repetition. When you measure progress too soon, you convince yourself nothing is working. But when you give your effort enough months, not days, not emotional bursts, you begin to see momentum, and momentum changes everything. Because once progress becomes visible, confidence follows, and when confidence joins discipline, acceleration becomes possible. There is another shift that quietly changes everything: focus. Many people fail not because they lack ability, but because they divide it. They try to offer everything, serve everyone, be visible everywhere. It feels productive, it feels ambitious, but in reality, it spreads effort too thin. When you attempt to master 5 skills at once, you rarely master any. You become average in many areas, memorable in none. True progress begins the moment you narrow your target. One problem, one audience, one skill, and you decide to become exceptionally good at it. Not decent, not competitive. Exceptional depth creates authority. Authority creates trust, and trust creates opportunity. When people know exactly what you are great at, they remember you. They refer you. They rely on you. Specialization may feel limiting at first. You worry about missing out, about turning away potential chances. But focus is not restriction. It is concentration, like sunlight through a magnifying glass. When scattered, it warms. When concentrated, it ignites. The moment you commit to doing one thing extraordinarily well, your work gains clarity, your message sharpens, and the market begins to recognize you. Not as someone who tries many things, but as someone who truly excels at one. Even after you narrow your focus and commit to one path, success rarely arrives in a dramatic burst. It unfolds quietly. At first, the changes are small: a slightly better result, a returning client, a conversation that leads somewhere promising. Nothing that looks impressive from the outside, but inside, something important is happening. Consistency is beginning to compound. Many people miss this stage because they are waiting for a breakthrough moment, a headline achievement, a sudden leap. But real growth often feels ordinary. While it is building, there may still be setbacks. A lost opportunity, a difficult month, a period where progress slows again. That does not mean the foundation is weak. It simply means growth is not linear. What matters is that each cycle leaves you stronger than before. More skilled, more prepared, more resilient. Over time, the small wins begin stacking faster. Momentum becomes visible. What once required enormous effort now feels manageable. Then one day you look back and realize the distance you have traveled, not because of one lucky break, but because you stayed long enough for steady improvement to turn into measurable success. As progress becomes visible, something else strengthens alongside it. Conviction. Not loud confidence, not arrogance, but quiet certainty. You no longer need constant validation because you have evidence. You remember the early days when nothing moved, when doubt was louder than results. And now you see proof that persistence reshapes outcomes. This is where perspective changes. Failure stops feeling like a verdict. It starts feeling like tuition. Each setback becomes information. Each mistake becomes refinement. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" That shift is powerful because it removes fear from experimentation. You are no longer terrified of being wrong. You are focused on improving. When you look back at your earlier attempts, you see that they were not wasted. They were incomplete lessons, necessary steps that prepared you for this stage. The narrative in your mind transforms from "I keep failing" to "I keep learning." And that internal story determines whether you continue rising or quietly retreat. In the end, What separates long-term success from repeated collapse is not the absence of failure. It is the meaning you assign to it. And this is where the story truly comes together. Not in the moment of applause, not in the numbers, not even in the visible success, but in the realization that nothing changed except your decision to stay. The world did not suddenly become easier. Opportunities did not magically appear. You simply stopped quitting too soon. You studied before acting. You committed longer than your emotions wanted. You focused instead of scattering your effort. And over time, those choices reshaped your results. Most people are closer than they think. They stand just months away from traction, just lessons away from clarity, just one disciplined season away from momentum. But they walk away during the invisible phase. If there is one thing to remember, it is this: failure is not a signal to stop. It is a signal to adjust. Refine, strengthen, then try again with more awareness than before. You do not need a perfect plan. You need a longer commitment, a sharper focus, and the courage to continue when progress feels slow. Stay a little longer, learn a little deeper, improve a little more. Because sometimes, the only real difference between those who make it and those who almost did is one more attempt made with better preparation and unwavering persistence.